Today I'm joined by Dr. Anthony Chaffee, and we're going to be reacting to the worst nutrition advice on the internet. Let's get straight into it. Here's the first clip. This is a good one.
No one will do carnivore in 2030. And here's why. Either you will be dead because you get a heart attack, or you will realize that it's not helping you because you have vitamin C deficiency, you have glucose deficiency. If you don't eat fruits and vegetables, you get the biggest deficiencies ever. How far have we come that people only eat meat and only eat eggs and dairy, or just only meat?
So what do we think?
Well, I mean, where do you start when someone's completely missed the entire premise of nutrition? There are no missing nutrients in meat. That's the entire point, and that's why people right now are living, fully carnivorous lifestyles from every descent all over the world, but also historically and prehistorically. The Inuit right now are their native diet up until they've been co-opted by Western society. It was just meat. That was it, and so. Glucose deficiency, that's wild. I remember that
You mustn't be
before.
far off that. You've been on this for 10
Yeah.
years. It's probably going to catch up
well,
to you soon.
well, that's it. Yeah, I mean, when my glucose is just perfect, it's 82, 82, 82, 82. I don't know where this glucose deficiency is coming from, but I mean, I've never showed up in my medical textbooks. I'll tell you that. I never heard of a glucose deficiency, vitamin C deficiency. I mean, that one's just a common trope that's just been disproven so many times. I mean, if you don't eat carbohydrates, carbohydrates block out the absorption of vitamin C by also competing for binding sites with the GLUT4 receptor, GLUT4 transporter. So you need over 1 million times more vitamin C to overwhelm the competition they get from carbohydrates. But also, if you're eating protein, what do you need vitamin C for as far as deficiency is concerned? Is scurvy, and scurvy is a misdevelopment and misfolding of collagen because you need to hydrolyze proline and lysine to make properly tight bound collagen. And vitamin C catalyzes the reaction to hydrolyzed proline and lysine. Okay, well, fun fact, you get hydrolyzed proline and lysine from meat. And so the only time you need to hydrolyze it de novo in yourself is when you're getting those proteins. Either you can get those from plants or whatever, but you're not getting hydroproline and hydrolysine, right? And so you have to the only way you need that is if you're getting those proteins from plants, and you'd have to hydrolyze them yourself. So yeah, if you're eating plants, then yeah, you need some vitamin C because you're getting crummy nutrients. But if you're not, you're already skipping that step, and you don't need vitamin C for that. In any case, you could use vitamin C in other ways, but you don't need it for that. So that's wild. I mean, the thing is it's just, he can say that all he wants, that people are going to, die of deficiencies and heart disease, but the evidence is totally against him. I mean, there are people that have been doing this again for a lifetime. They don't get vitamin deficiencies. They don't get nutritional deficiencies. They don't get heart disease. Before the Inuit, the Maasai, and all these other native populations started eating Western food, they had some of the lowest or non-existent rates of cardiovascular disease and chronic disease. There's a large study with the Maasai in the 1920s. They showed they had no cardiovascular disease, no diabetes, none of these chronic diseases. They started creeping up over the last century because they started eating more plant foods and more junk foods, and but it did not come from the meat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's almost impressive how confidently he is when he's saying these things, because it's just completely made up nonsense. But he sits there and says it with full conviction.
Well, when you literally don't know anything, then like you can speak with all of that conviction. It's generally the people that don't know much are the ones that are the most confident with it. But this guy in particular, people don't know him. He's like an acolyte of the medical medium. So this is a guy who admits to giving medical advice and nutritional advice from the voices he hears in his head. That's who the medical medium is. If you didn't understand that, he says it on his page that he is a medium, and he channels the spirit of compassion. I don't know where that was in the Bible, but I haven't heard of it before. And so he's saying that he's getting medical advice from this spirit that he hears in his head. So he's listening to voices in his head and giving you medical advice. And you can follow that if you want to, but you won't catch me doing it.
Jeepers. Well, we're just warming up. We've got some advice coming up next that is equally as bad, I'd actually say.
Oh, yeah.
Eating Just a single egg a week can increase your odds of getting diabetes by 76%. 2 eggs a week doubles your odds, and just a single egg a day triples your odds of getting diabetes.
Now, I've eaten a lot of eggs recently. I'm sure you've eaten a few eggs over your time. I don't have diabetes. You don't have diabetes. Where do we even start with this one?
I mean, based on what? Based on, what piece of evidence? Some food frequency questionnaire where they ask them, every 4 years, hey, what'd you eat last 4 years? And you would never ever be able to remember all of that. And you had to estimate how many eggs you ate a week. You had to estimate how much bacon you had per week. And they're inherently inaccurate, and they're at the best they're hypothesis generating. They cannot actually confirm or deny a hypothesis. It's just a hypothesis generating. And a lot of these data are coming from the Harvard nurses study group from Walter Willett. He's a known vegan activist and is highly compromised with financial ties to processed food industry. And the nurses study, the nurses cohort, were taught to us in medical school as some of the worst data out there. That anytime there's experimental data that tries to confirm or deny this, that it never stacks up. And in fact, they never confirm. It's like they just find that it's all wrong, and so it's completely inaccurate. And not only is it completely inaccurate, it's being utilized by people with an agenda. They're pushing a vegan processed food agenda because they're getting paid to, and for whatever reason they're into that. But McMaster has been using nutritional epidemiology and finding the exact opposite. And so they have the Pure study, which goes completely counter to the data from the nurses cohort, for example. And it just shows you, if you actually crunch these things down in a different way, you can completely manipulate the data in any way you want. And so if you have an axe to grind and you have an ideology to support, then it's very easy to to manipulate that data in any way you want. But there's no experimental data showing a cause and effect relationship between eggs and diabetes. I mean, how would it do it in the first place? Diabetes is a problem of glucose and insulin. And so you're getting hyperglycemia, hyperinsulinemia, which does not happen from eggs. In fact, people are eating eggs and going ketogenic, and it's reversing diabetes. So how can it be that, if eggs cause diabetes, that people, when they only eat meat and eggs and don't eat carbohydrates and junk food and things like that, their diabetes goes away? If diabetes was caused by meat and eggs, how is it that exclusively eating meat and eggs cures diabetes? I'll explain that one. Riddle me that.
It does not make sense. I'd love to sit there and ask her, so how does this happen?
Yeah,
That'd be a
exactly.
funny follow-up video watching her try to explain it.
Oh, she's science.
This association study clearly shows it. Man, it's
exactly. Well,
insanity.
there's
Some
about
of the
5,000 other ones that show that it doesn't. So there you go.
a bit of common sense, I think, would lead us there too.
Mhm.
Next
Sure.
up, we've got the main man himself, Bryan Johnson, and his pill diet. This one's
And
gonna
his
be a good
pill
one.
diet, yeah.
His pill diet.
Spending millions of dollars trying to create the perfect diet. What I did is I asked all my organs
No,
in the
we
body,
didn't.
heart, liver, and kidney, what do you need to be your best self? We looked at scientific evidence, and this is the result. A diet exactly mapped to produce 50 perfect biomarkers. My speed of aging is currently slower than the average 10-year-old. So let me show you what I do on a daily basis. When I wake up in the morning, I drink the Green Giant. Collagen peptides, cinnamon, spermidine via chlorella powder, amino acids, 57 pills. I then work out for 1 hour. I come back inside. I have Super Veggie, which is a few pounds of broccoli, cauliflower, mushrooms, black lentils, ginger, and garlic, extra virgin olive oil of a very special type, and 100% dark chocolate, which is bitter, and I pair this with the vegetables. 1 hour later, nutty pudding, which is macadamia nuts, walnuts, flax seeds, berries, sunflower lecithin, pea protein, an additional roughly 40 pills. I'll have a third meal of the day, which includes vegetables, berries, and nuts, and some more olive oil. Altogether is 2,000 calories.
I gotta say, I would pay a lot of money for him to watch Plants Are Trying to Kill You by Dr. Anthony Chaffee on YouTube. I think that would revolutionize his life a little bit.
Well, I mean, but also, I mean, if he just ate a steak, he wouldn't need all those hundreds of pills. Yeah, I mean, like, why is he taking all these supplements if he has the perfect diet? And in fact, his own his own statements early on was that he wasn't spending millions of dollars to find the best diet. He was spending millions of dollars to hack the system and try to age less and less, and different supplements or different procedures or whatever that would help him slow down aging. And he said originally that he did a vegan diet because that was his preference. And he's told his doctors and his team to figure it out. And that's why he was taking something like 160 supplements a day when he started out. And whereas if he just had some meat, he wouldn't need nearly any of those supplements, certainly not from an essential nutrient standpoint. And so, how can something be an ideal diet if you have to take so many supplements? I always say to people that, like, if you have to take supplements, then by definition your diet is deficient, and so obviously it is a bad diet. And whatever else you say for herbivores, carnivores, omnivores, what we are definitely not is supplementivores. But like that's what Bryan Johnson is trying to say. He's literally a supplementivore. He's just living on supplements because his diet cannot support basic functions, and he'll die without those things. So obviously that's not the case. I mean, there's a lot wrong with that video. First of all, his squats, what is he going, 15%? Like, Jesus Christ, man, ass to grass, get some depth in your leg press and maybe do a squat. So some of the top trainers say, when you do a squat, we know that this increases your speed, your jump height, your sprint speed, your athletic performance, and all these other sort of markers. And when you increase your increase your leg press weight, we know that you get better at doing a leg press, right? So like this is not even a necessarily useful exercise. And my goodness, like get some depth, full range of motion, for goodness sake. So if you're spending $2 million to get that shoddy exercise routine, like you are really wasting your money. Another thing is that this is a bit of a marketing thing as well. He said at first, no, I'm just doing this to help people. I just want to live a long time or whatever. I'm not doing this to make money. And yet now he's gotten his blueprint program popular. Of course, now he's selling it. And so that's, of course, what this is. It was just a big marketing campaign. I mean, this is just liver. Bryan Johnson was also the Liver King. So this is just Liver King 2.0. This is vegan Liver King, but instead of pushing, liver supplements, he's just pushing vegan supplements. And that's all this is. It's just a marketing ploy. So yeah, not too impressed with that. And also, he talks about his biomarkers and things like that on his website. They even say that this is like, oh, these are the best markers that he's gotten over a 2-year period. So that he's not the healthiest person in the world because he doesn't have those biomarkers in those optimal levels at all times together. He's cherry picked those. And so, someone pointed out when they sort of did a takedown of Bryan Johnson, the pill king, and that he, when he fasted for 5 days and ran a marathon, prior to that, his cortisol was really low. All these other things were really low. He fasted for 5 days, then ran a marathon, and his testosterone was really high prior to that. Then he ran a marathon and fasted and ran a marathon, and his cortisol was super high. His testosterone tanked, and all these other things gotten worse. However, his blood sugar was super low, and his fasting insulin was super low because he'd been fasting for that period of time. So you're going to take your testosterone from before that, your cortisol from before that, and then cherry pick your insulin and your blood sugar from after that. That's what Bryan Johnson's doing, and so it's not honest, is what it is. So, and I look at some of his things, and I'm sorry, but his blood tests are not optimal. Like, I mean, I think it's a great idea to try to say, okay, how do we amp up our body and make ourselves as healthy as possible? Well, first of all, you could just eat meat. Because genetically we're designed to live 120 years on average, according to our telomeres and our chromosomes. So if you just stay out of your own way and don't mess up, you should make it to 120 without doing anything special. And part of that is just eating meat, not all this other garbage. So you're going to tack on another 40, 50 years in your life if you just eat to your biological design. So I don't think for a second that him doing what he's doing now is going to outstrip anyone, a native Inuit just eating their natural diet and living. I mean, the longest lived Native American was 137 years, Chief John Smith White Wolf. People say, well, but this is why that was fake, and well, whatever. That was their records. We don't have a birth certificate one way or the other, but he died in the 1920s. He was a chief, and everyone says his children, his grandchildren, his great grandchildren, all his tribe said, yeah, no, he's 137. That's how old he is. We've known him our whole lives. And he died in the 1920s. And he describes multiple times over the decades his experience fighting in the War of 1812. So if you're old enough to fight in the War of 1812 and you die in 1927, you're pretty damn old, no matter from any estimation. So I doubt that Bryan Johnson's going to get anything close to that, and certainly not with the same health.
It's funny how you got Bryan Johnson's diet with 150 different things if you include all the supplements, 10,000 different defense compounds, and many nutrients where you're not getting enough. Versus your diet where you eat one thing and you get every nutrient you need in perfect
and no
quantities
supplements
without any compounds, any defense compounds. It's absolute insanity.
Well, also his cholesterol is very low. His cholesterol, his LDL and total cholesterol, quite low. And that there's more and more studies, longevity studies in particular, showing that the higher your LDL and total cholesterol is, the longer you live. That's what's associated with longer life. So I would argue that he's looking at the wrong parameters and for longevity in his bloods as well.
And especially in his voice, like he's becoming very feminine too. Like if you look at old interviews of him versus now, he had like a much deeper, like more traditionally masculine voice. Whereas nowadays he's like, lack of cholesterol as a precursor to testosterone, possibly.
It is, but he's also taking, well, at least at some point was taking TRT. He denies it now, but he won't show his LH or FSH to show if he's actually on TRT or not. He's taking all sorts of different medications. He's taking Cialis, saying, "Oh, I have all these, nighttime erections." Like, dude, you're on Viagra. Like obviously you're taking this on a daily. Well, Cialis, it's the same idea. And you're taking this on a daily basis. Now, there are studies suggesting that taking daily Cialis can help from a longevity perspective. But again, these are associative trials. And either way, I mean, you can't count your erections and how great they are if you're taking drugs that specifically increase erections. That's not your body doing this. Those are the drugs doing this. And if you say like, "Oh, look at me, look at my diet, my blood pressure is perfect and it's flawless, and that's because of all I've been doing," it's like, yeah, you're on 5 blood antihypertensives and blood pressure medication. Yeah, but it's perfect. It's perfect. You got to admit it's perfect. It's like, yeah, but not naturally. It's not your body's doing this because your body is healthy. You're having to manipulate this with drugs. And that's the thing, you can't say that you're healthy and your diet is healthy if you have to manipulate all these statistics and biomarkers with medications and drugs. Whereas, my patients and myself, like we have, testosterone level. I mean, I have a 72-year-old man who tripled his testosterone as the testosterone levels of an optimal 25-year-old man. And I see that again and again and again and again and again, just changing your diet, and it maintains and persists, and so he's having to take all these drugs because his diet is so awful, because his program is so awful. He has to take copious amounts of drugs, copious amounts of hormones, copious amounts of supplements because his system and his diet are terrible. And that's just all there is to it. That's a fact.
Alrighty, we'll move on to the next one. We've got, this is a classic one here.
Seed oils are toxic. Seed oils are going to give you Alzheimer's. Seed oils are going to give you cancer. But I've done lots of research, and there is absolutely no evidence to show seed oils are harmful. Actually, they're beneficial for our health. And I'll come back to that. But the problem is that there is so much misinformation out there about how we eat and how it affects our health.
Has she been misled somewhere along the lines there?
Well, there's a lot of misleading information out there, and she seems to be a top proponent of that misinformation. So, the thing is that, there's, I'm sure there are plenty of studies, suggesting that seed oils are fine and cardiometabolically healthy. But, the origins of that were the Procter & Gamble paid the American Heart Association the equivalent of $20 million to say that Crisco and seed oils were heart healthy and that their direct competitors, butter and lard, were not healthy. And it was based on no evidence whatsoever. But now that's just this dogma that has lasted since then. And yeah, there's studies that suggest, again, these are correlative studies, a lot of them from the nurses cohort, all these other sorts of things that are, again, completely flawed. You're asking people to remember what they've eaten over the past 2 to 4 years. Try to remember every meal you've had in the last 4 years. Go for it. See how you do. Try it for the last week. Most people can't do that. Like you and I can, because it's just been meat, but I don't even know how much meat. It's like I'd have to guess on that too. So this is inherently inaccurate, and you can manipulate this data in any way that you want. And a lot of the studies that come out is being paid for by the processed food industry. The processed food industry as a whole has spends hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars on nutritional research specifically. What do you think their conclusions are? That their processed junk food is great for you. So there's no evidence that seed oils are harmful. That is nonsense. There's copious amounts of evidence that seed oils are harmful. It's just that the literature is muddied by all of this industry-funded research trying to suggest that it's not harmful. They say, oh, well, there's all these studies saying it's good for you, and there's some of them that says it's bad for you. Oh, we just don't have enough information, blah, blah, blah. Or you cherry pick and you just look at one side. But when you subtract the industry funded research, it's very much skewed in the other direction. And so, this is something that, trans fats, we were fighting this for a century before they became illegal. We know since the 90s these things cause cardiovascular disease and illness, and yet they didn't get banned until 2020, right? And so that was the original, Crisco, the hydrogenated vegetable oil. So these things are harmful. Okay, so, well, you have mixed epidemiological studies, but again, these are only hypothesis generating. They cannot confirm or deny anything. Well, let's go back to the large-scale interventional randomized controlled double-blind placebo-controlled studies, where, like the Minnesota coronary experiment that was done by our good friend Ansel Keys, who came up with the 7 Nations study and the cholesterol heart hypothesis, and saying that polyunsaturated fats are all good for you, all these other sorts of things. They've replaced animal fats with vegetable oils and butter with margarine, and it was double blinded, so no one knew what they were getting. They didn't know they were getting butter and margarine. They didn't know the oils that these things were cooked with or versus fat. And they did this with nearly 10,000 people who were institutionalized. And so they controlled every single meal. So they weren't getting outside meals or anything like that. So it's as control as a nutritional experiment is possible to get, really, and ethically, and without kidnapping people for a couple of years. So and so they found that replacing animal fats with polyunsaturated vegetable oils did indeed lower LDL cholesterol and total cholesterol. And as a result, more people died of heart attacks and strokes. And that was in a linear dose-dependent relationship. And that's been reproduced in other experimental data sets as well, like the LA Veterans Veteran Affairs study, et cetera, Sydney Hearts trial, things like that. There are about 5 large-scale randomized controlled trials doing this, replacing animal fats with polyunsaturated fats, and found that more people die of heart attacks and strokes as a result. There has never been a randomized controlled trial showing the opposite. And so, so again, experimental data trumps all. If it's the only thing that can show cause and effect relationships. And so the statement that there's no evidence that seed oils are harmful is ludicrous. Of course there are. There's copious amounts of studies showing that it is. There are studies suggesting otherwise, but you have to look at the source, you have to look at who's funding it, and you also have to look at the study design. Is this a food frequency questionnaire that is inherently flawed and inaccurate? So you have to look at those sorts of things. Or is this an experimental study design that can show a cause and effect relationship? Well, there are ones of this experimental design that can show a cause and effect relationship, and again, they show the opposite.
Mm-hmm. It's funny. You've got 2 things. You've got meat, this one food that contains no defense compounds, nothing bad, and then you have seeds, which already plants baby, the most defended part of a plant. Then you get lots of them, compress it all. Even then, it doesn't come out. So you got to get solvents like hexane to take more of it out. Put it through another 10 steps. Heat it, cool it, bleach it, deodorize, degum it. then at the end you've got something that's incredibly high in, you know, the inflammatory omega-6s such as linoleic acid, super prone to oxidization, and then people go, you know what, it must be the meat that's doing this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And
ludicrous.
you know, so yeah, and also, you know, whatever you can say that we're biologically adapted for, we know that it's not seed oils, because seed oils have only existed in the food chain for about 100 years at best. And so, you know, what, you know, biology is about adaptation. It's a immutable law of adaptation. You know, you are going to be, you know, things are going to be healthier from a food standpoint the longer you've been exposed to it. And so, especially when there's toxic elements to it, because you need to adapt to that way of eating. And we have not had time from a genetic point of view to adapt to seed oils. These things have never existed in nature, and we have not eaten them apart from very recently. And so we've had no time to adapt whatsoever. And we're trying to suggest that that they are you know, somehow super healthy and healthier than things that we have been eating for millions of years, and that most other animals on Earth have been eating for millions and millions of years. It just defies common sense. And there's an entire book called the Ancestral Diet Revolution, or Ancestral Health Revolution, by a friend of mine, Dr. Chris Kenobi. And it's just his magnum opus against seed oils. And he thinks that it's all seed oils, that seed oils are the worst things in our diet, and that, you know, there are other harmful things as well. But he thinks that the seed oils take the cake. And he's got this book covers hundreds of pages, has over 1,300 scientific references, and it's all against seed oils. And she's saying there's no evidence whatsoever against seed oils. Like, well, read a book, start with that one, and there's 1,300 references to start with.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for that. I appreciate you coming on. Hopefully, I didn't ruin your day by you know,
That's all right.
you haven't just see the state of
Getting pissed
medical
off. Yeah.
advice online. Awesome. Thank you.
No worries.